Chapter 21, Ron. Ron had curly hair and little feet. "I want to play kickball," he said. "You can't play," said Terrence. "Get out of here," said Dee Dee. "Scram," said Jason. "I want to play kickball," said Ron. "Well, you're not playing," said Terrence. "Beat it." Ron stomped across the playground to the hopscotch area. Jenny was playing hopscotch with Lewis. Jenny was on 9. Lewis was still on 4, but it was his turn. "I want to play kickball," Ron said. "So go play kickball," said Lewis. "Terrence won't let me play," said Ron. Lewis walked with Ron to the kickball field. "Hey, what about our hopscotch game?" Jenny asked. "You won," said Lewis. "I just beat Lewis in hopscotch," Jenny announced. Leslie, Rhonda, and Allison flocked around her. "Hey, Lewis," Damien shouted. "Do you want to play kickball?" "All right," said Lewis. "Ron and I will both play." "No," said Terrence. "Ron isn't playing." "Anyone who wants to play can play," said Lewis. "No, we can't," said Terrence. "It's my ball." "It isn't your ball," said Terrence. "You gave it to me," said Terrence. "I gave it to you to share," said Lewis. "If you can't share it, you can't have it." "Oh, all right," said Terrence, "but I get to pitch." "Ron and I will stand, everybody," Lewis announced. "All right," said Jason. "We'll kill them. We'll murder them," said Dee Dee. "We'll smash them," said Myron. "We'll see," said Lewis. Ron pitched, and Lewis played the other 8 positions. 20 minutes later, they finally got 3 outs. The score was 21-0. Ron was up first. "Infield in," shouted Damien. Everybody stood within 10 feet of home plate. "All right, Ron," Lewis shouted. "Kick it over their heads." Ron kicked the ball only 3.5 feet. Todd picked it up and threw him out. Lewis was up. Everybody ran back to the edge of the outfield. Still, Lewis kicked the ball over their heads for a home run. Everybody ran all the way back in again for Ron's up. He kicked the ball only 2 feet. Dee Dee tagged him out. Lewis kicked another home run. Ron then kicked the ball a foot and tripped over it on his way to first base. 3 outs. Ron and Lewis held the other team to only 5 runs the next inning. That was because the bell rang. Lunch was finally over. Lewis and Ron lost 26-2. Ron had had a wonderful time. The next day, Ron said, "I want to play kickball." "You can't play," said Terrence. "Get out of here," said Jason. "Scram," said Dee Dee. "I want to play kickball," Ron told Lewis. Lewis walked with him to the kickball field. "Ron and I will stand all of you." Everybody liked the teams. Ron pitched while Lewis played the other 8 positions. They lost 57-2. After the game, Lewis took Ron aside. "Listen, Ron," he said. "Why do you always want to play kickball? You can't kick, you can't field, you can't even run to first base. You just get smashed every game." "Hey, now wait a second," said Ron. "Don't go blaming it all on me. You're half the team, you know." And with that, he punched Lewis in the stomach, and he punched a heck of a lot harder than he kicked. Chapter 22, The 3 Erics. In Mrs. Jewell's class, there were 3 children named Eric: Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and Eric Evans. They were known throughout the school for being fat. Eric Fry sat at this end of the room, Eric Bacon sat at the middle of the room, and Eric Evans sat at that end of the room. There was a joke around Wayside School that if all 3 Erics were ever at the same end of the room at the same time, the whole school would tip over. Eric Bacon hated jokes like that. That's not surprising. After all, he wasn't even fat. In fact, he was the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewell's class. But nobody seemed to notice. The other 2 Erics were fat, and so everyone just thought that all Erics were fat. "But I'm not fat," Eric Bacon insisted. "What's your name?" asked Jason. "Eric," said Eric Bacon. "Then you're fat," Jason concluded. And pretty soon, skinny little Eric Bacon, the skinniest kid in Miss Jewell's class, had the nickname Fatso. Eric Fry really was fat. He was also the best athlete in Mrs. Jewell's class. His body was solid muscle. However, nobody ever noticed. The other 2 Erics weren't very good at sports. Eric Evans was clumsy. Eric Fatso Bacon was a good athlete for his size, but because he was so skinny, he didn't have much power. So naturally, everybody just assumed that Eric Fry was also clumsy and weak. After all, his name was Eric. Whenever the other kids chose up teams, Eric Fry was the last one picked. They never noticed his home runs or the fabulous catches he made. Like all great athletes, he made the impossible look easy. Of course, the other kids did notice the one time that he dropped the ball. Eric Fry was playing right field. Terrence belted a deep fly to left. Eric Fry raced all the way across the field after the ball and at the last second dived at it. He caught it in midair on his fingertips, but as he hit the ground, the ball squirted loose. "Well, what do you expect from Butterfingers?" said Stephen. But since that time, Eric Fry has had the nickname Butterfingers. Eric Evans was the nicest person in Miss Jewell's class. He treated everyone equally and always had a kind word to say. But because his name was Eric, everyone thought he was mean. Fatso was mean because everyone called him Fatso. Butterfingers was mean because he always had to play right field. So naturally, everyone just assumed that Eric Ovens was also mean. They called him Crabapple. "Good morning, Allison," said Eric Ovens. "How are you?" "Lay off, Crabapple, will ya?" answered Allison. "If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all." All three of the Erics had nicknames. It was better that way. Otherwise, when someone said, "Hey, Eric," no one knew to whom he was talking. One time all the Erics would answer, and the next time none of them would answer. But when someone said, "Hey, Crabapple," then Eric Ovens knew they were talking to him. And if someone said, "Hey, Butterfingers," Eric Fry knew they meant him. And when someone said, "Hey, Fatso," Eric Bacon knew that he was being called. Chapter 23, Allison. Allison had pretty blonde hair and always wore a sky blue windbreaker. Her windbreaker was the same color as her eyes. She was best friends with Rondi. Rondi had blonde hair too, but she was missing her 2 front teeth. Allison had all of her teeth. Allison used to say that she knocked Rondi's teeth out. Allison was very pretty, so all the boys in Mrs. Jewell's class teased her, especially Jason. But Allison said, "Leave me alone or I'll knock your teeth out," like I did Rondi's. The boys didn't bother her after that. One day Allison brought a tangerine for lunch. She took the peel off in one piece. Miss Mush, the lunch teacher, walked up to her. "Allison, may I have your tangerine?" she asked. Miss Mush always gave food to the children, so Allison was happy to give her tangerine to Miss Mush. Miss Mush shoved it in her mouth and swallowed it in less than 4 seconds. Allison left the lunchroom and walked down to the library. The lunchroom was on the 15th story. The library was on the 7th. Allison already had her book. She just went to the library because it was nice and quiet there. The librarian walked up to Allison. "What are you reading?" she asked. Allison told her the name of the book. "That sounds like a good book," said the librarian. "I never read that one. May I borrow it?" The librarian always lent books to the children. Allison was glad to be able to return the favor. She gave the librarian the book, then walked down the stairs, outside to the playground. All of Allison's friends were playing freeze tag. Allison didn't feel like playing. She reached into the pocket of her sky blue windbreaker and took out a tennis ball. She bounced it a couple of times on the ground. Lewis came up to her. "Hi, Allison," he said. "May I play with your tennis ball?" Lewis always gave balls to the children. Allison happily gave her ball to Lewis. Lewis threw the ball all the way to the other side of the playground. Then he went chasing after it. Allison didn't feel like doing anything. Jason ran up and tagged her. "You're frozen," he said. "Get out of here before I knock your teeth out," said Allison. Jason shrugged his shoulders and left. Allison went back inside and up the 30 flights of stairs to Miss Jewell's room. The lunch period wasn't over yet, but Allison didn't feel like doing anything else. She had given her food to the lunch teacher, her book to the librarian, and her ball to the art teacher. She went inside her classroom. Miss Jules was there. "Oh, Allison, I'm glad you're here," said Miss Jules. "I'm having trouble with an arithmetic problem. Maybe you can help." "Sure," said Allison. Miss Jules always helped the children with their problems. Allison was happy to help. "How do you spell chair?" asked Miss Jules. "Chair," said Allison. "Yes, that's right," said Miss Jules. "I knew it wasn't Chare, but I couldn't remember what it was." "That's not an arithmetic problem," said Allison. "That's spelling." "Yes, you are right again," said Miss Jules. "I always get the two mixed up." The bell rang. The lunch period was over. Allison could hear the other children running up the stairs. "Allison," said Miss Jules, "you learned a very important secret today, and I don't want you to tell any of the other children, not even Rondi." "What was that?" asked Allison. She didn't even know she had learned a secret. She loved secrets. "You learned that children are really smarter than their teachers," said Miss Jules. "Oh, that's no secret," said Allison. "Everybody knows that."